Thank you for joining us. This is the infection tracking and antibiotic use tool, small talk this afternoon. And before I introduce my speaker, we're just going to cover a few things. Next slide, please. So I'm sure you're all familiar with Zoom at this point. If you could use the chat to introduce yourself, that would be great. We want to hear from you. And we encourage everybody to ask questions using the chat throughout today's session, but we'll have a dedicated time for Q&A after the presentation. Next slide, please. And just as a refresher, you can use mute or unmute yourself at the bottom in the taskbar, and then that's where you would access chat as well. Thank you. Next slide, please. So again, we know that you're so busy, so we appreciate you taking the time to join in with us today. Please put your name, organization, and role in the chat. We will be recording today's presentation, and we do ask that you keep yourself on mute just to help with the background noise during the presentation. Thanks. Next slide, please. As many of you probably know, iPro is the QIN-QIO for 11 states in DC. And if you want to find out more, we will provide our website at the end so you can learn more about us. Next slide, please. So our learning objectives for today is to recognize CMS's nursing home requirements for infection prevention and control, including the antibiotic prescribing. We're also going to describe how the iPro tracking tool can help you meet those requirements and help you be prepared to implement this tool to comply with those requirements. Next slide, please.
Hi, this is Dave Johnson. I'm a Senior Quality Improvement Specialist with iPro, and I'm going to do a small talk today on infection tracking and a tool that's available to you at no cost. My goal for this short presentation is to quickly touch on some of the basic requirements of the final rule that dates back to 2016 relating to infection prevention and control, along with the tracking of antibiotics. And then I'll talk about the tool that's available from iPro to meet some of those needs. The tool itself has gone through some revisions and enhancements since I initially created it, just prior to the implementation of that final rule. Within the final rule, section F880 specifically relates to infection control. As shown on this slide, the intent of this regulation is to ensure that each facility has facility-wide systems for the prevention, identification, and control of infections within their building. As part of a surveillance system, each facility must have a data collection tool that ties in nationally recognized criteria for surveillance, such as McGear, Loeb, NHSN, for example. Other key points in the surveillance system include the type of infection, pathogen, signs and symptoms, the location of the resident, and some summary and analysis of the residents who have developed infections. Also within the final rule, section F881 is specific to an infection prevention and control program. The intent of F881 is to ensure the development, promotion, and implementation of a system that is facility-wide to monitor the use of antibiotics. Mentioned in this section is an antibiotic stewardship program for the regular reporting of antibiotic use and antibiotic resistance to any relevant staff that are described as prescribing clinicians and nursing staff. That system of reports should also contain antibiotic use monitoring. This information is taken directly from the interpretive guidelines regarding the definition of antibiotic stewardship. It refers to a set of commitments and actions designed to optimize the treatment of infections while reducing the adverse events associated with antibiotic use. This can be accomplished through improving antibiotic prescribing, administration, and management practices, thus reducing inappropriate use to ensure that residents receive the right antibiotics for the right indication, dose, and duration. To continue with F881 related to an infection and prevention control program, such reporting should include the rate of new antibiotic starts, the types of antibiotics prescribed, the days of antibiotic treatment, and the program should establish a frequency and method or mechanism for feedback to prescribing practitioners regarding their antibiotic use, prescribing patterns, and the compliance with any facility-specific protocols. Now with that, I have a challenge for you with a simple question. Does your facility have a current system in place to comply with even the basics of the final rule in regards to both infection control, prevention, and the prescribing of antibiotics? This tracking tool from iPro is one Excel tool to track infections, antibiotics, days of therapy, and any prophylactic use of antibiotics. It calculates infection rates, both facility-wide and for up to 16 separate user-defined locations. There are prescribing pattern reports for both all prescribers combined and the reports for individual prescribers. The calculations, summary tables, and related graphs are all instantaneous. Much like the other tracking tools that are available from iPro, this tool was built to be used monthly. There is a month-end routine that automatically scrubs the file for resolved infections, discharged residents, and antibiotics that have been stopped. The remaining data for what I will call open cases is saved to a new file to continue tracking through the next month. As mentioned before, the tool will separate your data into as many as 16 different user-defined locations. Those could be floors, units, neighborhoods. It's your choice. And you will have the ability to build a user-defined listing of up to 25 separate prescribing practitioners. It's important to set up this listing on the Prescriber Listing tab at the beginning because the list links to the drop-down for the prescribers on the data entry sheet. Now let's take a look at the tool itself. Now within the tool, there is a data entry tab where all of these specific data points are captured. Each column header is clearly labeled and the entry cells all have a simple pop-up explanation or directions, along with any other appropriate drop-down menus for the user choice. There are columns that automatically calculate based on data entry, for example, days to resolve an infection or days of therapy for a particular antibiotic. You'll also see that there are buttons to click to add a new case, or you may sort the sheet by the resident names, and there's also a button for the month-end routine, where the data is scrubbed to remove things like discharged residents, infections that have resolved, and antibiotics that have been discontinued. All of the remaining information is carried over into a new file for the next month so that you can continue your tracking without having to re-enter all of the basic information for each case. This is a screen print of the location designation sheet. This tab is part of the initial setup before you start actually using the tool itself. On this sheet, you may enter specific identifying names for separate graphs and summaries, be they floor or unit names, neighborhood names, whatever works for you. This is also the tab where you have the opportunity at the end of the month to enter your resident days for the month, both facility-wide and location-specific if you wish. These resident days are used to automatically calculate the statistics in the summary tables. You have to enter resident days at the end of each month for the tracking tool to accurately calculate and display appropriate rates for that month. The average daily census column automatically calculates based on the total resident days for the month and the number of days in the particular month being tracked. I would suggest that you collect the appropriate number of total resident days both across the entire facility and the total resident days for each location you have decided to carve out of your data. This is very important if you want to have the accurate rate calculations for both the entire facility and for each individual location, and those calculated rates will be displayed on each of the individual facility-wide and location-specific summary sheets. It's also important that you are specific in your facility designation description, because that information will be provided as a footer on all printed reports. I set it up that way so that the reader would always know whose data they are reviewing. Within the tool, there is a facility-wide summary. This, along with other summaries, are automatically calculated, and supporting graphs are instantly built for both review and printing. You will see that you get summaries by antibiotic prescribing, antibiotics by infection, and everything is captured to include new for the month, ongoing days of therapy, and any prophylactic use. In this case, all data is summarized and graphed into a printable 6-page report. Now, I've done a couple of screen prints to illustrate the prescriber listing tab within the tool itself. This piece is part of the setup maintenance of the tool that has to be completed before you start using the tool, and I'll illustrate why. On the first screen print, I have circled the prescriber listing tab at the bottom of the tool. The tab opens a dialog box where you have the ability to enter up to 25 separate prescribers' last names. This is an important setup piece because you will see on the second screen print how I show on the data input sheet in the prescriber box that the drop-down offered pulls its information from the choices that you put on the prescriber listing tab. This slide shows one of two tabs or sheets available to show prescribing patterns. This one provides a summary for the prescriber group as a whole, along with graphs to show both overall antibiotic use for each prescriber in the table and new antibiotics for a particular month. This prescriber-specific tab allows the user to choose an individual prescriber by name from their listing and gain immediate access to the patterns and graphs for that individual prescriber. This 5-page report may also be printed for both sharing and review with that individual prescriber. For example, the tab could be printed as a PDF and sent as an email attachment to the prescriber, since it does not contain any PHI. Just as a reminder, the prescriber listing tab that I mentioned as part of the initial setup of the tracking tool, the listing of prescribers on that tab also flows to the drop-down choices on the prescriber antibiotic detail tab. The prescriber that you choose will be clearly displayed on the top of each page of this 5-page summary report. You will remember at the start of this slide presentation that I mentioned the requirement within the final rule for a surveillance program to include what they call nationally recognized criteria, such as McGear, Loeb, NHSN. Also included in the tool are resource or reference sheets or tabs specific to both the latest McGear and Loeb criteria. These tabs are easily accessed within the same file itself. Now, just for a quick review, within the 5 elements of QIAP, element 3 speaks to feedback, data systems, and monitoring. And the key points within this element talk about having a system in place to monitor care and services. It talks about once you collect it, you need to organize it in a way that's understandable to your team. And it mentions the effective use of clear data that is factual and not based on any assumptions. You also have to make sure that factual data is readily available to ensure that your performance improvement project teams or your PIPs are targeting the right areas and have the ability to monitor that progress. Now I'm going to talk about some interventions that you can take on your infection tracking and your prescribing practices for antibiotics. First of all, you need to establish a competency with the requirements of the final rule so that your appropriate staff all understand what is in the expectations for that final rule. You need to ensure that you have a strategy to meet those requirements from that rule itself. You need to make sure that your strategy includes useful processes and tools to collect and review and analyze your data on both infections and antibiotic prescribing patterns. And you need to develop a timely process to review your collected data with the appropriate clinicians. So how do you gain access to this tool? You will see on this slide that I have provided a link to access the tool itself. The link takes you to a request page where you are asked for your name, title, facility name, and email address. This information is only used for our internal tracking. Once the information is submitted, a download of the form along with a user's guide is immediately launched. Please take the time to review the user's guide prior to starting use of the form itself. Even though the form is very user-friendly, I believe that it's far easier to gain an understanding of exactly what the tracking form's functionality is before you put it into practice. The guide will also provide you with a simple desk-side reference document for any questions that come up along your way. As mentioned, the tool is provided at no cost. On this slide, I have provided you with a link directly to the cms.gov webpage specific to the laws and regulations for nursing homes. On this site, you will see a helpful download section that you may navigate to any number of resources that are specific to the regulations. In particular, there is a link to the final rule content, information specific to other sections within the final rule, such as the infection preventionist training, and a link to the entire final rule document specific to the conditions of participation for long-term care facilities in both the Medicare and Medicaid programs. Most all of these resources offered are downloadable in a PDF format for easy review, searching, and they're also printable in smaller focused sections if you wish. Now I'll leave you today with this slide that has my contact information, including my email address. Email is by far the best way to reach out to me with any questions that you may have or suggestions. Please feel free to do so, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, for that great presentation. So now is our time where we're going to have a Q&A. So please, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, or if you want to take yourself off mute and ask Dave a question, this is your time to share or clarify and ask questions. So go right ahead. And to get us started, I'm just going to ask Dave a question myself. So Dave, if you can't do everything, you know, everybody's so busy and limited time, where would you start? Where should you begin with using the tool?
I think obviously the best thing to do, in my view anyway, is to, as I said in the presentation, is to get a hold of the desk side reference that's part of the download that has all the screen prints that shows you exactly what you're going to be looking at on the screen. It's kind of a troubleshooting guide, explains what the tool does. I would definitely look at the tool and the information that it asks for in those columns, because the best thing in my mind is to start it at the beginning of the month. And that could be, depending on your facility size, you could do the whole facility, or you could just do a unit at a time. It's really up to you what you want to do, but I would start small if you want to, and I would start at the beginning of the month so that you would see at the end of the month, when you put in the resident days, you would actually see all the calculated rates.
Thanks, Dave. That's really helpful. So what, if you know, for successful implementation, you know, what do you think needs to sort of be in place, you know, the prep work for implementation of the tool?
As I said, it has to, what you can do is when you open the tool, even a blank, it will print out, the data sheet will print out, so you can actually see the information that is, if you will, going to be asked when you initially set up this tool. Because there's if you think about it, the initial setup, it asks for obviously the resident name and the infection and the date of the infection and start date for any antibiotic, what it was, who the prescriber was. So those things, the best thing to do is to have those ready and preloaded into the document so that you could start at the beginning of the month without having to fill all of that stuff. I mean, it's really, I set it up to try to be as friendly as possible, where, like I said, you click on a cell and it tells you exactly what it's asking for. And it's the initial setup will take a little bit of time, obviously, because you have to enter all the data for it to be there. And the other important thing, obviously, is to do your prescriber listing and to do your decide what you want to do as far as carving out your data, if you want to do it by floors or units or neighborhoods, or I've even had some, I don't know how practical this is to do, but I've even had some facilities that have attempted to do it by assignment. But I think that might be a little more difficult to get a handle on. So those decisions all have to be made. You can always change it. You can always change your location designations. You can add prescribers. You can delete prescribers. It's all very user-friendly.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dave. Anybody have?
Yes, Laura, this is Kathy. Dave, you talked about, you said you could also change it, but is the template something that can be modified? Do you need to say something about that?
Yeah, I will. I appreciate you bringing that up, because this form has so many, it's kind of deep in the programming, if you will, or if you want to call it that, the Excel programming that's in there for the end of the month routine and the summary tables and all of that. I generally say do not try to change any of the column headers or whatever, because if you do, it will certainly break. So I would not recommend making an attempt to change the column headers or the I have a lot of the stuff is locked down, password protected, so you're not going to be able to make changes. But on the data sheet, sometimes people get in the back door, they try to change something, and then next thing you know, they're reaching out to me because something's not working anymore. So stay away from changes. What I would say, by the way, is, as I said in the beginning of the presentation, this tool has gone through a couple different version changes, and that was from feedback that I received from users. So I do collect regular suggestions from people, and if and when we get to a point that you know, some global change that would apply to everyone would need to be done, then I would make a change in the form and we'd release a new version, and I'm sure notify people of that.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Dave.
Yep.
So we do have a minute or two for additional questions. If anybody has a question for Dave. Brian, you can go to the next slide, please. So while you're thinking, you know, feel free to put a question in chat. We do just want to leave you with a couple of tips for success. You know, whenever you're starting a new project or, you know, trying to do some quality improvement work, it's always great to identify 1 or 2 champions to take the lead on the project and to start small. You know, you start with just 1 unit, you know, do it for a couple of weeks and evaluate and adjust as needed. And you can always reach out to us with questions. Next slide, please. So we are going to have a follow-up, and we, you know, encourage you to join in. You can kind of come with questions then after you maybe try to use the tool and, you know, share how it's going, or, you know, if you're looking for tips. And I will put that in the chat as well. And we will be sending this information in our follow-up email too. Next slide, please. So we're going to send this as well in the follow-up email, but we encourage people to provide feedback. You know, we want to make sure that what we offer here is of value to you, and, you know, we definitely, you know, appreciate you taking the time to fill this out. So next slide, please. So we are having adverse drug events as the next topic. So this will be on our events page, and we encourage you to join us for our upcoming small talk. I'll put that link in chat as well for the upcoming event. Next slide, please. Here is our webpage. We have a resource library. You can learn more. If you want to reach out to us, you know, for information about this tool or other tools, please, you know, feel free to contact us. Next slide, please. Most importantly, we thank you for your continued partnership and your commitment to quality improvement. We are here to help support you during this time, and we hope that you have a good afternoon. Thank you.